Good evening, Father.
Hi, Marilyn. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, you're the only one so far.
Okay.
We'll just give it a few more minutes and see if anyone logs in.
Sure.
So yeah, it's hang tight.
Yeah.
I know.
What's been
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What's been going on with you?
Well, not that much. I mean, just kind of trying to fill the time for the most part.
Yeah. I bet it is hard.
Yeah, but it's been better recently. After Easter, it kind of got a little better. I mean, it was during Lent. It was weird because it went through like having a full schedule to nothing, and so now it's filling up a little more now, which is good.
Good.
Yeah. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well.
Good.
I actually have found out when this is all over, I need 2 to 3 days just to kind of stay at home. I do enjoy it.
Just to decompress, huh? Yeah. Are you more of an introverted person then, Mary Ellen?
No. But I have found with this, though, I'm enjoying the time. So,
well,
my husband has to go back to work next week. I think for the week.
Okay.
So,
well,
it'll be different.
I do know I've been getting a lot of sleep lately, which has been really, really good. So, but other than that, it's been it's been all right. So, I mean, one thing, just getting up in the morning, just celebrating the liturgy of the hours and the mass has really been the only motivation for the most part. So,
I know.
But it's good. It's been good.
Yeah. I'm still setting my alarm at 5:50, and I get out of bed by 6. Do the rosary at 6:30 with EWTN, and then kind of start in on the day.
Good.
So
good. Are you watching everything on Facebook or YouTube?
Whatever. I don't do Facebook.
Oh, you don't?
So it's got to be YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a Facebook person.
Well, we thought that would be a good option because, you have to sign up for Facebook and everything. And for people who didn't want to do that, it might be a good. But I think the quality on Facebook is better.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about that for the most part. Oh.
And my granddaughter is keeping me very busy.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I have her. This week I have her 2 days. Next week I'll have her 3 days.
Okay, great.
So, So we have a little nursery here at our house.
So,
and
are your children isolating then too, or how's that working?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
They are both working from home. My daughter-in-law works on the second floor of the house. My son works in the dining room on the main floor.
Gotcha. Okay, good.
So that's basically my circle.
Yeah, I know my niece has been living with my parents for the last month, since basically when this all started back in mid-March. And just last week, my sister took them back from my parents. But she's a COVID nurse. She has a nurse on the COVID floor at Barnes.
Oh, wow.
So it's we might not be able to see them for a while. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, my daughter's a nurse at Cardinal Glennon, and she works in the pulmonology clinic.
Oh wow, yeah.
She lives 3 blocks away from us, her and her husband. So they'll just walk over and stand in front of our house and we'll converse with them. But as far as really spending time with them, no, we have not.
Well, I think we've been going, apparently my parents have been going over their house and staying outside. And that's been okay. Yeah. I don't think they touch. But I was over at my parents' house on Sunday. We sat outside. That was fine without the mask. But we're inside, wear the mask. When we're outside, a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. Just such a strange time.
It's odd. Yeah. And, and that's one thing to say, I think it was prudent based on the information we had to do what we're doing. But I think now we're finding out more and more that I think we went to some extremes that we probably shouldn't have. But there you go. You gotta do what you gotta do.
I know. I find Steve on the computer every morning, reading all these updates from the scientists of what's going on with it. Because he teaches at the dental school in Alton. So he said they're supposed to reopen June 1.
Oh, really?
In Alton. Yes. And he said he'll have to have 2 different face masks and the plastic shield, put things over his feet, a gown, scrubs. He goes, it's going to be awful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just going to take so much more time.
Well, we just extended the restrictions for the Archdiocese till the 15th, just today. And so, but also we've been talking about strategy as far as opening up for social distancing. So one thing I and Monsignor and some of the other people will be getting ready for having a plan together when we start having public masses again.
Good.
So it's probably gonna be somewhat limited starting out, but we'll hopefully work our way. Communion might be a little different.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got a plan. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to take a lot of training on everyone's part to get used to it, but I think it'll be okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think everybody's ready to get back.
Oh, I agree.
See all of you.
I agree.
I mean, yeah.
Well, it's so much like I kind of miss going over to the school and going hang out there and stuff. Yeah, but it's but I don't know. I don't know if they miss it, but I mean,
I think they do. I've talked to the ladies from our prayer group that their grandkids, and they're like, oh my gosh, they so wish they were back in school.
Yeah.
Just to see everybody. And
well, I feel really bad for the 8th graders and like the high school seniors. That's just kind of a rough time to go through this,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, and Steve, he deals with the juniors and seniors at the dental school.
Yeah.
So he has to go up there next week to sign all these students out. And then they're going to do a virtual graduation sometime. I don't know when.
I know Vianney was talking about doing something online for theirs, but I'm not sure how that's going to work. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just So I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. I was going to ask you, if no one else shows up, we don't have to do this.
Well, what I typically do is like what I did last time was I just kind of put like a little Ferverito out there and kind of did my spiel. And so if anyone wanted to put anything on the comment section, go ahead. Okay. I know like Patty and Scott Rose, they were trying to get on last time, but I don't know. There's something happened with I don't know. So, yeah, if you want to log off, that's fine. I'm going to do something, though. Put something out there, and I keep it on the webpage, on the channel.
Well, I'll be happy to listen.
Okay.
I wrote it down. Why does the church teach that the Eucharist is the real presence of Jesus? Well, I mean, isn't that the summit of our faith?
It's a very simple answer. But I think the problem is not everyone really understands the depth of it, right?
I think you're right.
So, really, the answer is why do we believe it's a real presence? Well, because Jesus said it was, right?
Okay.
But then it takes a little nuance to show, especially with some of our brothers and sisters in other denominations, where he says it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because if you asked what it comes down to is even our brothers and sisters of other denominations, especially those in like, Lutheran, even some Baptists, like, Anglican, we're finding that we're actually saying the same thing in different languages for the most part. But the question is, how do we define what the real presence means, right? So, for instance, what most people will say, well, how do you interpret John chapter 6? And so just this past week in the liturgy, we just got finished going through John chapter 6 in the masses, right? And it's interesting because John is the only gospel writer that doesn't actually have a Last Supper narrative, right?
Okay.
So John's catechesis on the Eucharist actually comes from John chapter 6. And this is over the course of 2 days that Jesus, the day before, he feeds the 5,000, right? And then he gets on a boat and he walks on water, and the disciples see him walking on the water. And then they end up in Capernaum, which is his base of operations. So the rest of John chapter 6 is given from the synagogue in Capernaum.
Okay.
And so the gospel starts with the feeding of 5,000. It goes through his walking on water. And the next day, the people wake up and realize that Jesus isn't there. And they realize that the boats are gone of his disciples. But the boat that Jesus was in is still there. So they go across the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum to go look for him. And it's interesting because if you see where the feeding of 5,000 is compared to where Capernaum is, it's not very far away, actually on a map. Like, it's actually down the coast, really, from the Sea of Galilee on the eastern side. Western side. And so it's only maybe about 3 miles away from each other. I think you froze up there, Mary Ellen, but can you hear me? You got me? Okay, good. All right. So, so it starts off, the people come to Jesus, and Jesus is telling them, like, oh, you were coming to me because you're hungry, right?
Yep.
And that's really what it starts off with, is that, these people are coming to Jesus looking for him because they want to be fed again. They figure, well, if he fed us yesterday, he can feed us today, right? He did this miracle with the loaves and fishes. So that's what we want with the bread. And so Jesus takes the beef and says, my bread is the true bread from heaven. And what we're referring back to is the manna, right? And he tells them specifically that who feasts on this bread, they'll never be hungry again. And so the people, of course, are still thinking with their stomachs, like, yeah, okay, great. We'll take that bread. Let's go. Bring it on, right? But then he kind of goes deeper, and he leads them down this understanding of the spiritual aspect of what he's saying, right? Is the bread, Moses didn't bring this bread. God gives this bread. He gives all the things we need. And so it raises kind of a question in their minds, is he actually talking about real bread or like a figurative type of bread?
Okay.
And then he goes even deeper, and he says, well, my flesh is the true bread from heaven. Now, that's kind of the turning point for this conversation, because he says, my flesh is true food and my blood is true drink, and you cannot have life within you unless you actually eat of my flesh and my blood. And so just like it would be for today, for first century Jews, they're thinking he's talking about cannibalism, right? It's like, well, how can his flesh be true? What's going on here? And it's interesting because the Greek word for eat in this is not actually eat. It actually is more closer to gnaw. So what is Jesus telling them? You have to gnaw on my flesh and drink my blood, right? And so this is raising kind of like these bells and whistles for these people. They're like, well, wait a minute, that's not right. That's wrong. That's cannibalism. How can we do that? Well, what's interesting though is that John tells us that many of his disciples then went back to their former way of life after he said this.
They left. Right.
And so what's fascinating about that is Jesus doesn't stop them, right? He doesn't say, well, hold on, wait a minute. I'm just talking about this figurative symbol I'm talking about. No, he actually even doubles down and goes to the disciple, this 12 disciple, and says, do you guys want to leave too? Because what I'm actually talking about is my flesh and my blood. So you can leave if you want to. If you can't handle this, go ahead. And that's where we start kind of diverge, I think, with some of our brothers and sisters in other denominations, that some sects of Christianity would say, well, wait a minute, he's really just talking figuratively. He's talking about a symbol, his bread and body being a symbol. Well, our response to that is, well, if you look at the actual verbiage in Greek and what he's actually doing in the entire context of the gospel of that chapter, he's not saying it's a symbol. And he's willing to go to the point of letting them all leave him to make this point. So now, at this point in time, we don't really know exactly, the disciples didn't know exactly what he meant. The thought is he's still talking about his flesh and blood, and he truly is. But how he means that doesn't come in until the Last Supper. So in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we're told then this all makes sense. And we would think that this passage in the Bible would have been in the 12 disciples' minds when he actually talks about breaking, this is my body, this is my blood. So he's showing that if you have to look at those in context with each other, not separately, that even though, there's truly his bread, it truly is his flesh and his blood, but in a sacramental way, that the being of this bread and wine becomes the being of his body and blood. So that's kind of the crux of our theology when it comes to that, is that, the words of Jesus, this is my body, and this is the chalice of my blood, that he being God can make that possible. Because he's
through the transubstantiation.
Transubstantiation, right. Now, that raises up another kind of question when we talk about when we talk to our Anglican brothers, our Lutheran brothers and sisters. One thing Luther kind of divided on was the concept of transubstantiation. So what that means is we're saying that Jesus is telling us that when he says those words and then gives the power to his disciples, when he says, do this in remembrance of me, that the very essence of the bread and wine changes from bread and wine to Jesus' body and blood. So in that respect, you can still have the taste of bread, the taste of wine, all we call the characters or attributes or accidents of bread and wine, but the very soul of it changes. Luther, his concept was, well, there's almost like an amalgamation of bread and God, to where both entities exist in the same thing. So he would call it consubstantiation, meaning that the body of Jesus takes existence with the very being of bread. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because the very presence of Jesus is present. We still would hold that with our Lutheran brothers and sisters, that the very being of Jesus is there. Now, we would say, though, philosophically, and on a deeper meaning, it wouldn't make sense the being of bread would exist with the same being of God, because the very being of God would overtake that being of bread, right?
Okay.
The higher would consume the lower,
Right.
So that's more of a philosophical argument, not necessarily a theological argument, right? So we can still hold that. Okay, well, all right, you believe that is actually bread and God. Okay, fine. There's still a true presence of Jesus there. Okay, so we can kind of hold that. Where we would differ, though, and the big question that always comes up is, well, if I go to a wedding in a Lutheran church, where let's say they even have a tabernacle, because some Lutheran churches have tabernacles because of that real presence of Jesus. Could I go receive the Blessed Sacrament? Or receive communion in that respect? And the answer to that from ecclesiological standpoint, we will know, because because one thing is the Eucharist is a symbol of unity, and that's a unity of belief and a unity in doctrine, right? So the problem is right now we're not unified in that, right? But the other side of the coin too is that the way the Eucharist comes about in a Lutheran church is different than we would say in an Orthodox or even a Catholic church. Is that there may not be valid orders present to actually allow for that coming of the Eucharist.
Okay.
So it is possible that there's a lineage of apostolic lineage in the Lutheran church. The problem is not every priest or bishop, for that matter, can actually trace their lineage back to the apostles.
Yeah, okay.
Or the Catholic Church we can, and even the Orthodox Church we can, right?
Okay.
So then it would raise the question, well, can I receive in the Orthodox Church? And the answer to that will be, well, yes, you could, but also because, again, the Eucharist is it's a symbol of unity, right? Even though it is the true presence of Jesus, we're still not unified with our Orthodox brothers and sisters either. So even though you could receive it, you probably shouldn't, more so out of respect to them and their right than really because it's the true presence. So in a pinch, sure. If you were in a place where the only place you could go to Mass would be a Greek Orthodox church, sure. The Catholic Church say you can receive that Eucharist in that church. The problem would be is that the Greek Orthodox may say, no, you can't. And that's really where the disconnect comes. That from the Catholic perspective, yeah, that's Jesus. You can receive him all day. But out of respect for that particular church, they may not want us to do that.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a nuance there when it comes to the Orthodox Church. Then same thing with the Anglican Church. They kind of have the understanding almost like Luther. But again, do they have valid orders? Now, there are actual priests and bishops in the Anglican Church that actually can trace their roots back to the apostles.
Oh.
So, okay, but the problem is they don't know who's who. And so if you're in a particular, Anglican church or Episcopal church and say, well, can I receive the Eucharist here? Well, I don't know. It depends, and they may not be able to tell you either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of one of the big sticking points when it comes to the reception of the Eucharist, that even though we do have an understanding of the real presence, is it truly the real presence of Jesus? Well, we would say you have to have valid orders to actually bring about that true presence.
Mm-hmm.
And not many of our other brothers and sisters in other denominations really can trace that back to the apostles.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's would be the only reason we'd say, like, I don't think that's really the issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, in a nutshell, that's kind of what it comes down to, is the fact that, if you read John 6, in this kind of persistence of our Lord saying that this truly is my body and blood, and then if you look at it in the context of the Last Supper, where he actually brings the Eucharist out about, but also we have to rely on the tradition of the church too, that this was being done even after the resurrection, the ascension, that the first, I think it was interesting that, I think it was the second Sunday of Easter, we had the Road to Emmaus in Luke.
Right.
And what you see there really is it's one of the first masses. That Jesus, again, as that priest, is breaking that bread, telling him to do this, and he's bringing himself again in that bread, breaking the bread and the wine. And so the other apostles would have followed suit with that and kept on doing that throughout on the Lord's Day of the 8th day, right, on the Sunday. So that's the tradition of the church that we rely on, and not only that, but also the writings of the fathers and the Didache. The greatest one of that is Justin Martyr, who was writing to the emperor about what their religion is all about, and he basically spells out the same order of Mass we even have today.
Okay.
And so even in this, as far back as the 2nd century, it was still being done that same way. And so we would hold that this has been the tradition all throughout church. The problem is, again, and to be fair, that didn't really get fully defined until the Middle Ages, when these guys like Calvin and Henry VIII and Martin Luther and Zwingli were bringing these questions to the church. But instead of waiting for the answer, they kind of broke away and started their own thing, where Trent was the one that kind of finalized the sacramental theology on the Eucharist.
Okay.
But that was, again, based on all this information that came up, all the fathers. And so we would say that, we're pretty confident this is what Jesus taught us based on the apostolic tradition, but even the scriptures itself. So I think if you're a well-meaning Protestant, you can't help but look at this and say, look at it in the context of everything and say, you know what? It looks like this really was not a symbol. That wasn't the intent of Jesus. It really truly was to be his true body and blood. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, very interesting. Okay, I want to ask you something. I always wonder, when you hear about Jesus coming back after the resurrection, like on the road to Emmaus, like, oh my gosh, it is Jesus, but he didn't look the same. I always wonder, what did he look like then?
Yeah.
I mean, that they didn't realize it was him in their presence until he said a few words, and then he's out.
Well,
and
there are kind of two schools of thought on that, Mary Ellen.
I don't know.
Yeah, one. I mean, it's very possible he was hiding his physical appearance from them. Partially, it could be because he was in his glorified body, right? So the resurrection was in his glorified body, so it may not have been recognizable when he was here in his earthly form. That's possible. The other possibility that's been kind of presented is that it's more of a rationalistic thought. That, okay, look, if you just witnessed that your master was crucified, right? And let's say that all of a sudden 3 days later, this person maybe looked like your master is walking around. Would you assume it's your master, or maybe someone looks very, very close to him? And so that's the thing, right? So really, it's really these familiar actions that the Lord does, where it becomes recognizable, right?
Okay.
So like with Mary Magdalene at the tomb, Mary, oh, Rabboni, oh wait,
Yeah.
oh you know me. Oh wait, okay, so it must be you, right?
Yes.
The breaking of the bread. I mean, the disciples, you know, that would have happened. They may not have actually been there initially. They would have been told what happened at that Last Supper and would have known what happened, and said, okay, well, this is, and then the fact that this appeared right after that. Oh
Yeah.
well, okay, that must be it. So it's there's kind of few schools of thought on that Jesus was maybe trying to more instill in his disciples what he was actually talking about and saying.
Okay.
Especially his understanding of what, you know, his teaching about the resurrection and what happened then, which probably makes more sense than the fact that he would hide himself in some way so they could actually realize that on their own. Or it could have been just, hey, you know what? Yeah, I really am alive, and they're actually coming to understand that in those actions that he's doing, even though he may have even looked like Jesus in their presence.
Yeah, because I think in my mind, okay, what did he look like?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like what's going on here?
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
but like you said, the actions and
right.
hearing him talk and
right.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it could be very easily said. Well, you know, they would have not assumed that this really was Jesus if he'd already been dead. I mean, he was in the tomb. Now, it does say in that road to Emmaus, which is kind of fascinating, that, you know, we heard this disturbing news from the women among us, that they went to the tomb, he wasn't there. Now, again, you know, logically, you could say, well, maybe someone took him, right? In other words, as human beings, we have a rational standpoint. We have to think through all the possible solutions. And in the absence of any further evidence, we would actually go with the impossible, right? And so that's what he was kind of doing. He was kind of checking off all those possibilities, saying, nope, wasn't that, and here I am, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of real. It's kind of rational to think that. But I mean, yeah, he could have just appeared in some other form or in his glorified body they wouldn't have recognized and said, yeah, okay, now you know who I am.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because, you know, I think about my mom. She's been gone 6 years, and I just think, okay, she's going to come back in her glorified body. Is she going to, like, recognize her?
Right.
Hopefully I will.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, when she was healthy and good and, you know, at a certain age, I mean, it's just so, so interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating because, like, you know, this all is a really deep theological question. What will our glorified bodies look like?
Look like? Who knows?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There actually is a great justification to say that. Well, Psalm 24 is a great example of that. So, Psalm 24 kind of states, "Who is the King of Glory? You know, open up the gates." So what that is, it's sort of like, you know, Solomon was kind of credited with a lot of these, and David was actually credited with a lot of these Psalms being written. And so part of that could be, well, that could be the Davidic triumph coming into Jerusalem, right? Raise up the doors, the King's coming. But that also could have a prophetic meaning, where, you know, as actually, it was funny. I think in one of the homilies that the deacon did, I think he also Monsignor Schamlofer. He was saying that, you know, there's an old adage that Lucifer, at the time of the crucifixion, while Jesus was in the under the earth in the tomb, Lucifer tried to pawn himself off as Jesus, and that this refrain of lift high your gates, right? What the angels were asking him to do is show them his wounds, that they would know him. And of course, he didn't have the wounds, so they didn't open the doors, right? So Jesus' true glorified body would probably bear the marks of his sacrifice.
Right. Well, yeah, because Thomas said, I need to see those wounds. And so, I mean, Jesus was in the glorified state at that time, but his wounds were still there.
Right. And so that may be well, like, what is our sacrifice? How does that come show up bodily in our physical being? Well, I don't know. You know,
I don't know.
It's a fascinating discussion, and I can't really wait to see what happens when we get up there and see how that works. But yeah, but
I know. I wonder if, like, we can pick a certain age. Okay, I thought I looked really good at this age. Dear Lord, that's where I want to be.
Was it Thomas Aquinas? I think in his writings, he said it was, I think, the age of 30.
Okay.
Or maybe it was 33, because, you know, I think it was kind of the age when Jesus. So it's kind of like that. Now, for some of us, we didn't look so great at 33. So maybe, I don't know, that's the thing. Thomas Aquinas didn't look that great at 33. So who really knows for sure? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That is funny.
But
Yeah.
we'll see. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that's the thing is that but that even kind of solidifies the point that, the recognition of Jesus in this sacramental offering that really shows it's his true presence. And that kind of solidifies, I think, that understanding. I mean, because even we're told even the 40 days after the resurrection, that the whole time he was spending appearing to all these people, he was solidifying to the apostles what his teaching truly was, right? Mm-hmm. And even John himself, at the end of his gospel, says, he did a lot of other stuff here that we can't even write down because it'd take too long. Which is why we rely so much on the apostolic tradition, because that's where we get the rest of this stuff. Right? Which, unfortunately, some of our brothers and sisters in other denominations kind of reject it. And they're saying, well, sola scriptura, or, fide sola. Well, all right, but the problem with that is all that stuff is coming from a position of, even like sola scriptura, as we talked about in the first session we had back in January. Well, the Bible came from tradition. Mm-hmm. Even Bible had its source in something. And even faith alone, or that you don't find that in the Bible. So you're justifying your whole faith base on something that's not even in Scripture, but it's not even found in Scripture. So you're left with a cyclical argument of, okay, where's the basis of this? And what you find is, well, this Augustinian monk who decided that he wanted to go do this and didn't really get any, backing on it, and did his own thing.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Very interesting.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. That was all right. So hopefully it'll be enough for some people. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we got to get the word out. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it'll be better when we start meeting again.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Oh, I think, yes. Yeah, and I don't even know. I must have gotten this off the bulletin.
Well, I know it was on the webpage too. There was an announcement on the webpage. So, yeah.
I bet. Okay. All right. I wanted to throw something out. I had sent an email to Monsignor. I wanted to do a public square rosary. I've done it in the past where we just stand on the steps of church. I've got a big banner from, oh my gosh, I did it in May of 2017 for the 100th anniversary of Our Lady of Fatima.
Oh, sure, yeah.
A big banner, America Needs Fatima. And I haven't heard back from Monsignor. I'm not going to ask him again. Yeah. I just know he'll get back with me.
I will tell you, Marilyn, I mean, honestly, I don't think we have a problem with that if you did it, though. I mean,
okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's a big problem. As long as we maintain social distancing and all that stuff, I don't think it's an issue. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to wait. I'm not, because I would like just to put it out there.
Yeah.
Like my prayer group and the Endow ladies and anybody that we can get in touch with.
I'll bring it to his attention too and make sure he knows about it. But I think I don't think you have a problem with that.
Okay. I sent it out on Saturday.
Okay.
And it was so funny because his letter came out then and he talked about the month of May praying the rosary. And that has helped me through so many things. And it's just something Steve and I get up and do every morning is to pray that rosary.
Praise God.
So, yeah.
Well, save a bead for me.
Wonderful.
Save a bead for me.
I pray for you guys all the time.
Oh, good. Thank you.
We love you and we need you. So, anyway.
All right.
So, are you going to have it again the first Tuesday in June then, hopefully?
Yep. Yeah. I think the next one, I might be talking a little bit about maybe same-sex attraction.
Oh.
So that might be a hot topic. Yes. We'll see how that goes. Yeah.
I would love that.
I think we'll do that.
I would love that. One of my dear girlfriends from high school, her son, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be good to talk about.
And it's about crushed
dad.
Yeah. Is it biological? Is it, just
Yeah.
how does all this come about?
Well, and that's
So,
the thing. I think the problem with that is the jury's still out on that. I mean, we don't really know for sure. And but ultimately, it doesn't matter. And we'll talk about that probably in next month in June. We'll get into that a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Well, thanks for tuning in.
Okay. Well, I hope to see you between now.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Yeah. Okay. You take care.
Thanks,
okay?
Marilyn. God bless.
Enjoy.
All right. We'll see you.